I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read about the almost daily reports of the destruction of churches, the pillaging of Christian property, the rape of Christian women, the terrible exodus of Christians and other religious minorities from Muslim countries. All this is violence.
Right, so if I may
the debate
finish.
is not on Christianity or other religions.
Of course.
I know that it is difficult to talk about the violence, but I don't think it's right to continue to change the subject.
Let's let Majid land
If I may
his
finish,
point.
so either
Ayaan Hirsi Ali found herself in the middle of three thirsty Muslim men, all out to whitewash Islam to snow. In her true fashion, Ayaan spared no second, unleashing the raw, undiluted truth about Islamic violent foundations. In this explosive 2013 Richmond Forum showdown, the ex-Muslim warrior proves she doesn't play nice or hide behind platitudes. She ripped the mask off moderation myths while the panelists were left licking their wounds. This one is not a polite interfaith dialogue. This is a former insider exposing the rot from the inside out.
By Somali men invoking Allah and Muhammad to justify their horrid act. Kenya is the most hospitable country to Somalis fleeing their own country. So it distresses me even more. I disagree with my father when I look at the reports this week of 30 men and women worshipping in Iraq who are killed by a suicide bomber invoking the very same God and the very same prophet that they invoke. I disagree with my father when he says that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the 120,000 dead in Syria, Syria is now a stage of a proxy war between Islam's two most important and most influential nations, the Sunni Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Shia Islamic Republic of Iran. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read about the almost daily reports of the destruction of churches, the pillaging of Christian property, the rape of Christian women, the terrible exodus of Christians and other religious minorities from Muslim countries.
On this epoch-making debate is Ayaan Hirsi Ali, the Somali-born activist and author of Infidel, fled Islam's brutality and now fearlessly critiques its texts, treatment of women, and incompatibility with modernity. In her words, Islam is not a religion of peace. Case closed. There's no better way of putting it.
Done by men who invoke the founding father and founding documents of Islam. I disagree with my dear beloved father when I read about the teenage girl in Pakistan who's shot point blank in the head by a man invoking Allah and Muhammad because she wanted education. In the name of Allah and Muhammad, women are forbidden to drive. They're forbidden to own their own reproductive rights. They're forbidden to do anything unless they have permission from a male guardian.
Facing her are Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf, a prominent voice pushing moderate Islam, and Majid Nawaz, a reformed extremist turned reformer. Moderated by John Donovan, the importance of this session couldn't be overstated as it forces a long overdue reckoning. Is Islam inherently peaceful, or does denial of its violent strands doom any hope of reform?
I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read these founding documents and I study the history and the example of the Prophet Muhammad. In there, I find an insistence of war and intolerance towards infidels, the hypocrites, those who associate God with others, homosexuals, women, and so on. What Islam needs is not a denial of these overwhelming and compelling facts. Islam needs a reformation. Muslim leaders who are serious about achieving true and enduring peace need to revise the Quran and the Hadith so that there is a consistency between what the peace-loving Muslims want and what their religion says. We are now in America. Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf here tonight likes to compare the American Constitution to Sharia law. The Constitution is only 225 years old, and it has been amended 27 times. The Quran is at least 1,200 years old. It has not been amended once. What a shame. It is urgent and imperative to start these amendments. It's time to innovate, innovate, innovate. And I will do, ladies and gentlemen, what I can do to help. Thank you.
Everyone condemns violence in religion's name. And all acknowledge most Muslims aren't violent. Common ground, right? But here's where the fault lines crack wide open.
It seems to me I've heard common ground already in the obvious sense that all three of you condemn violence perpetrated in the name of religion. All three of you, I think, also acknowledge that the majority of people who identify as Muslims around the world are not engaged in violence. It seems to me that where there is some difference is this question of whether the acts of violence by a small minority define the faith or are a perversion and a hijacking of the faith. And I want to go first to you, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. We just heard Imam Faisal make the point. He made an analogy to historical episodes of wrongdoing by faiths that are more familiar, for example, in Richmond, Virginia, Christian faith. Of course, historically, wars have been fought by Christians with each other and against other groups, and yet there's no tendency in our culture, therefore, to say that there's fundamentally something wrong at the root of Christianity and its definition. And I'd like to ask you why you make that leap in the case of Islam and Muslims.
What I do is I listen to the men, mostly they are men, there are some women, but mostly men, who invoke the founding documents of Islam and the founding father of Islam. And I look at what they say and then I think, is that in the Quran? For instance,
Notice how she zeroes in on verses about men's authority over women and permission to strike wives. You can historicize it or apply it today. The men doing the latter, mobilizing young followers with these exact commands, are far more influential than polite reformers. Al-Qaeda doesn't recruit with spin. They use the Quran and Muhammad's example straight. The denial here is what's truly frustrating.
We all know I'm very much concerned about the subjection of women. So when I read a verse in the Quran that says that men are the maintainers of women and that husbands are allowed to hit their wives, I look at that verse in a way and I think you can read that in context, in its historical context, or you can apply it to our times. And the men who are doing that, who are applying all of these verses and the example of the Prophet Muhammad, not to the 7th century, but to our time, I find, and it's very unfortunate, but I find them to be far more influential in inspiring and mobilizing young men to see the religion of Islam the way they see it than the way either Imam Faisal says he sees it or Majid Nawaz says he sees it. And that's a fact. You know, you look at Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda does not use bin Laden to recruit new people. Al-Qaeda uses the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad to recruit young men. So that we have to stop this denial and at some point try and address the influence of these documents. And the way to do it is to, you know, to look at what is in there and not deny it. Well, it's just the denial that is so incredibly frustrating.
Let me ask Majid then.
As Ayaan drops this bomb, you can see the panel's discomfort building. But wait till you hear what Majid Nawaz has to say.
Is religion per se, or if we don't want to say that, if we don't want to say that every single religion, and there are people that say that, Richard Dawkins is one of them, yeah, who is as consistent against Christianity as he is against Islam and Judaism and all faith, full stop. Mm-hmm. Or we say, okay, if the problem isn't religion per se, then it must be about the way that religion is interpreted. And if that's the point, then I agree with Ayaan that today there are serious challenges with the way Islam is interpreted, and I wish Muslims were doing more to challenge those interpretations, not just in the political sense, but also in the social sense. We need to hear more voices speak out. There are many reasons why they don't.
What are the reasons?
Well, you know, two of us on this stage, I don't know about the Imam, and forgive me, but I hope I am mistaken, but Ayaan and I both live with death threats over our lives. And the reasons for that, just last month, after the Kenya Mall attack, the Somali al-Shabaab added me to their hit list of British Muslims.
But you know, it's the fact that you're both under death threats for speaking the way you're speaking that raises the specter of the notion of Islam as a religion of violence. It's a very bad headline.
Of course, well, that's a point that, of course...
And that's really why we're here.
Majid tries framing extremism as a recent politicization of Islam, not the faith's core. Nice play. The real issue, he argues, exploded with 20th century movements like the Muslim Brotherhood, mixing faith with revolutionary politics. Ayaan knows better than to let it slide.
I think the point though that you were making in the center of what you were just saying, and take it to Ayaan, that the Imam is making the point that the kinds of misbehavior, for want of a better term, that is expressed through Islam of the types you're describing is a rather recent development. That, in other words, if we were to go back 250 years, we wouldn't see the Muslim world acting in that way in any fashion, any sort of political fashion, aggressive fashion. What's your response to that?
Well, my response is that I respectfully disagree. Islam was founded by Muhammad, who proclaimed to be a prophet, and in the early years in Mecca, he emphasized what we now would describe as religion, prayer, fasting, charity, taking care of the orphans. But then later, in his time in Medina, when he developed, a following that was large enough to organize a militia, then the revelations he said he was receiving from God changed, and they became more military, and he became militaristic. And if you look at the history of Islam from that time in Medina up to now, what you see is, first of all, an intertwining of politics and religion, and conquest after conquest. And when these conquests were made, then God's word was applied, or at least there was an attempt to apply divine law to govern. And yes, in the last 200 years after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Islam has found itself on the defensive. And the answer to that, to say Western ascendancy and Western imperialism, is where...
You see, Ayaan has proven time and again that she knows her onions. Prophet Muhammad's intertwining of politics and religion became baked in. From early caliphates to today, applying divine law through force isn't fringe interpretation for many. It's mainstream in too many places. The last 200 years of decline don't erase 1,300 years of pattern. And when you look at Ayaan's lived experience as a woman under Islam, it gives her moral authority the reformers can't easily dismiss.
Begins history, and where are these two different strands and two different voices? One group of people saying we need to copy the West, that is, separate religion from politics, as did Kemal Atatürk in Turkey, and several others saying no, we need to, you cannot really be a Muslim, and you cannot be a Muslim society unless you are ruled under the Sharia. That debate, dialogue or confrontation, whatever you call it, is not over in the Muslim world, and we see that today in Tunisia, we see it today in Egypt. But I think it's just not empirical, it's not supported by the founding documents, it's not supported by the history of Islam to say that, it's just something from the recent past, the recent 100 years. That's just a point we just happen to disagree on.
That's preposterous. Say that I've only started history 200 years ago is not at all what I was saying. And to suggest that is a travesty. The Ottomans, who were in power until 1923, 1925, were a haven.
1924, the caliphate was abolished.
Yeah, but the Ottomans ruled until 1923. Okay, until that time, and even thereafter, under Ottoman rule, the Ottomans ruled over Turks, over Greeks, over Arabs, over Bulgarians, over Muslims, Christians, Jews. The people used to come, Jews used to come for safe haven under the Ottoman rule. In India, Muslims ruled over vast numbers of Hindus. If the intention of Muslims from the very beginning were to eliminate any other religion, there would be no other religions under Muslim rule. But until 60 years ago, Alexandria in my country was a majority Greek city. What has happened is that there's some very major fundamental...
Watch the stakes skyrocket here, because questioning the texts themselves is what the panel least wants to confront head-on.
...which happened in the last century and a half. The idea of a nation-state, the idea of a nation-state based upon Islam, which I myself argue are incoherent concepts. These things have developed strands of movements.
What is the travesty? What is preposterous? What did I say that is preposterous?
That my reading of history starts 200 years ago. That's absurd.
Yes, Majid, please come in.
No.
Let's let Majid.
I kind of, because of the work I do and the cause that I have, see myself between these two positions, in that everything Ayaan describes is wrong with Muslim majority countries. I agree with 100%. That the discourse is currently dominated by those who don't interpret Islam in the way that Imam Faisal does, or in the way that I would have everyone.
The violent strand is not a hijacking. It flows from source materials when taken literally today. Reformers like Majid and the Imam represent hope, but the mobilizing voices citing Medina-era commands inspire more action. Denial helps no one. True peace requires divorcing politics from religion and confronting the text honestly.
And nobody leaps from that to thinking that Judaism is an extremely violent religion, even though that young man essentially brings the text to his action. And yet with Islam, that leap is often made, and I'm trying to understand why you think that is.
So I want to point out, we can't...
Actually, I wanted to put the question to Imam Rove first, and then I'll come to you.
Well, I mean, it is made because that link is not made because as Christians and as Jews, you get it. You understand the political motivation behind it. Mm-hmm. So the vast majority of Muslims do not make that link either. The vast majority of Muslims see these things as not legitimately interpreting the religion of Islam or something outside the state of Islam, just like the majority of Jews would not consider the assassin of Dr. Rabin as legitimately expressing the Jewish faith. This is very much the case in the vast majority of the Muslim world.
So it's what you're really saying is it's our...
Notice how the panel keeps circling wagons on perception, that the media amplifies extremists, creating siege mentality on both sides. But Ayaan's clarity cuts through it all. Ignoring the doctrinal roots while extremists recruit with them is suicidal. While Majid concedes challenges in interpretation, but insists most Muslims reject violence, Ayaan agrees on numbers yet demands we stop pretending the inspiring texts aren't the problem for those who take them seriously.
Collectively, our culture here, it's our not knowing enough about Islam or enough about Muslims.
It's about the way perceptions are shaped.
Mm-hmm.
Perceptions are shaped by events, very much, for most people. And just like, when I'm in Muslim majority countries, they will say, why is America attacking Islam? They view that. Why? Because when some major in the US military says, we're in Iraq because this is a crusade against Islam, that gets a banner headline in the Muslim world. So that shapes perception in a very powerful way.
Is it the view in the Muslim world that this country, our country, is dedicated to destroying Islam?
There are large numbers of people who feel that way based upon these types of headlines. This is why I said that the cycle of extremist actions and extremist statements get the banner headlines in each country. So when an Ayatollah in Iran saying death to America, this scares Americans, and Americans get this image that the Iranians are out to destroy and Islam is about to destroy America. Mm-hmm. Then you have,
This segment is pure fire. Even the audience can feel the weight. Ayaan is not attacking Muslims as people. She's diagnosing a system that subjugates women, mobilizes young men for conquest, and resists reform through denial. The moderator tries balancing it, but the radical truth remains nonetheless. Without facing the founding documents, moderation remains wishful thinking.
Who says this, and then somebody commits an act of violence that gets the headlines over here. Then you have a pastor who has only 30 people in Florida saying he's going to burn the Quran, and then it results in acts of violence. So the media grabbing these extremist events helps shapes perceptions and creates this sense of revulsion that people have, and a tendency to then whitewash all of those people and say, well, America is against us, or the West is against us.
Ayaan, you've been very patient. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been very patient. Thank you very much. So, is it the package?
This Richmond Forum clash is one prophetic panel discussion. Ayaan makes it clear she didn't come to comfort. She came to warn. While the Imam and Majid offered nuance and personal journeys from extremism, Ayaan forced the room to stare at uncomfortable scriptural realities. Verses on wife-beating, conquest and supremacy aren't ancient history when applied literally by millions. The radical stakes in all these is Western societies importing large numbers from cultures shaped by these texts without demanding honest reform. Ayaan's courage, risking everything as an apostate, exposes the cost of silence. Don't forget, moderates exist, but they're not winning the narrative on the ground.
The marketing, or is it the substance? Okay. In America, in the Western world, there are continuous debates about the place of Muslims. And yes, amongst Muslims in the West and amongst Muslims outside of the West, there is this general belief that Islam is under siege and that Americans want to destroy Islam. That is a matter of perception because it's not supported by facts. Now, we look at Islam, and I look at Islamic countries like Pakistan, and they have blasphemy laws. Part of the constitution of Pakistan is derived from or founded on the Quran or the Hadith. The constitution of Iran is Islamic. The constitution of Saudi Arabia is the Quran. You look at movements like the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamists in the countries that have sprung up after the Arab Spring, and these movements want to organize society along religious lines. This conflation between politics and religion, this is not something that I am imagining. It's not a packaging problem. It's substantial. So when you give the example of the murderer or...
Every parent, woman and free thinker should watch this. Ayaan lived the subjugation. She escaped it. Her warning should not be seen as Islamophobia. It is pattern recognition from someone who knows the doctrine intimately. The panel's discomfort proved her point. Questioning the roots triggers defensive denial instead of reformation. Britain, Europe, America, none of them are immune to the threat of Islamic overreach, spreading its tentacles across the West. Demographic changes plus doctrinal literalism create parallel societies where grooming gangs, honor violence, and blasphemy fears thrive. As Ayaan demands, we should stop whitewashing and start addressing the texts, inspiring the worst actors.
Rabin, he is a fringe. The state of Israel is not...
And he's in jail.
And he is in jail. And the Christian extremists here in the United States who take the Bible and then use it to kill people and hurt people, they are the fringe. But unfortunately, what we are seeing in Muslim countries is that the people who feel that they should be governed under the Sharia law are not a fringe. In some countries, they are a mainstream. In some countries, they are a minority. But in any case, it's a huge obstacle that cannot be ignored. And Islam can become a religion of peace if politics is divorced from religion, if science is divorced from religion. And for that, we need a reformation.
Majid.
So here's
The Muslim panel doesn't see Ayaan's intellectual hammer coming because too many prefer comforting myths over hard truths. Ayaan is giving voice to what data, crime stats, and terror incidents confirm. The question isn't whether most Muslims are peaceful, it's whether the unreformed core of faith actually enables the violent minority to dominate the story. What hit you hardest in this debate? Ayaan's textual challenge or the reformers' pushback? The comments floor is yours.